All right. Now I promised I would make the sign out button a separate component as well. I think all this CSS was actually in the one for user info in the static version, but here it is. And here's the issue. We have the hover pseudo class here. And you can't target a pseudo class in an inline style. And the way we're doing CSS in JavaScript right now, we're really using inline styles. You know, the way it ends up on the page is in that style attribute on the element. And you can't do things like hover with that. So we're going to have to do it another way. As I mentioned yesterday, CSS in JavaScript is a whole thing. Lots of strongly worded blog posts, some of which will be linked in the notes, or were yesterday, rather. But there's lots of different ways to do it. So we're going to have to learn to do one of the other ways. We're going to use a package called Aphrodite. Framework agnostic CSS in JavaScript. Supports a lot of the stuff that we need that we can't do yet. Works great with and without React. Supports media queries. Media queries are things like responsive design. So if the screen is narrower than this, use this layout. If the screen's wider than this, use this layout. You know, the kind of stuff that makes the same page work well on mobile and desktop and stuff like that. And it supports pseudo selectors like hover, active, etc. So that's beneficial to us. So the way it works, it actually creates a real style sheet and generates classes automatically out of the stuff you define in your object here. Randomly generated class names that are guaranteed to be unique. And then you actually assign those class names to your components. So it's really easy to use. So let's check it out. This is an npm package, so we will install it with Yarn. I'll paste this command in Slack. Yarn add Aphrodite. So go ahead and do this. Just following along isn't enough here, because if you just copy my components out, they won't work because you don't have this. So that command, yarn add, or npm install -- save, does two things. It actually downloads the package and puts it in your node modules folder so you can use it. And it adds it to the list of dependencies in package.json.
We should be doing this in the chattering directory?
Yes. Do it in the chattering directory. It'll add it to your package.json, and it will actually install it. Please note that sometimes when you install npm packages, you need to kill and restart your server for them to work. I don't think that's going to be necessary for me right now, but if it breaks and I get a funny error message about something not being there that I know perfectly well is there, always try killing your server and restarting it. So I'm making a new component called sign out. So capital S, capital O, sign out.js. Import React from React. Const sign out equals arrow function. Export default sign out. Returns from JSX. So this is coming out of user info. It's this part right here. So I suppose it makes more sense for this to be a button than a link anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and change it to a button. So this is a button with a little sign out icon in it. So looking at my documentation for Aphrodite, oh, they even have introductory videos. Isn't that nice? So here's an example. So they import two things from Aphrodite. They import style sheet and CSS. So let's copy that line, throw it in here with our imports. I'll paste that in Slack as well. So two things here. Style sheet and CSS. Style sheet is a class. And what we need to do is, instead of just setting const styles to an object, I'm going to call stylesheet.create and pass an object into that. So I'll write my rules just like I did in the other components. The difference being, instead of just creating inline styles, it's actually going to create real CSS out of this and generate class names. So here's what I'm going to do. Some styles for the button. These didn't all come out of here because since I used a button instead of a link, I need to do things like get rid of the border and so on. Actually, I think I updated this so that it does have all those. And then I can use things like pseudo classes by doing this. So inside this button rule, I just put :hover as a key. So it has to be quoted, right? I couldn't say : whatever : and have that work in an object. So I've got to quote the thing. And then just put my hover rules in there. So you can put pseudo classes as keys in a nested object inside a rule, and it will do the right thing. Let's prove it. So we imported style sheet and we imported CSS. Now remember I said that stylesheet.create will actually create a style sheet out of those with some new class names that'll be auto-generated. So each of these rules will have a class name associated with it. So to use that, I don't say style equal. I actually say class name equal because it's going to put the auto-generated class name in there. That's what this CSS that we imported is for. That's a helper function that returns the class name for one of your rules. So if I say class name equal curly brace CSS parentheses and pass in which rule I want, so styles dot button, that will return the correct class name. So let's see if this works. So that's my sign out component. Before I copy and paste it, I'll make sure it works. Let's import it into user info. And let's put it right here. There it is. Now, ho, look at that. Now where'd my right margin go? Where's my margin? Styles.avatar, margin right. Avatar, styles. Oh. Yeah, I messed that up when I was demonstrating things. There we go. Check it out. Woo! Woo! Totally works. So let's inspect that rascal and see what happened. Now most of these others, like avatar here, I have a bunch of inline styles. On the button, I just have a class. A class of button underscore YJUDVC, something it came up with automatically, which we can see has all these rules in it. And if I check it out, it even has the hover rule. Oh, that one isn't in there. Is it? I didn't put that in there. Oh, I did put that in there. Yes, I did. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to put this whole component on Slack, actually. I just wanted to make sure it worked first. Yep. So my hover rule there not only turns it white, it also changes the cursor, because otherwise it would be the normal cursor, and I think that looks funny, even though you don't usually have a different cursor over a button. This looks more like a link, so I like to change the cursor there to be the little hand. Cool. So that's another way we can do CSS in JavaScript. It has some advantages, not the least of which is that we can use things like pseudo selectors and media queries, aka responsive design. It creates real style sheets and generates class names automatically. So more flexible, cooler, but it does add a dependency. So add sign out component using Aphrodite. Questions? I do encourage you to check out the GitHub page, read all about it. It's good stuff. It's got some other features.